This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 814, recorded on Wednesday, March 10th, 2021. How to Hunt Volcanoes. Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Kiki, and tonight on the show, we are going to fill your heads with short stories, slug heads, and a big sponge. But first, thanks to our amazing Patreon sponsors for their generous support of TWIS. You can become a part of the Patreon community at patreon.com/thisweekinscience.
Disclaimer. The planet on which you are standing is likely nothing like what you imagine it to be. You might have a picture of the ground beneath your feet being made up of dirt and rocks and the occasional blind mole rat kingdom or dinosaur graveyard, and if you dig a little, you'll find that your belief is somewhat confirmed. Dig a little deeper, and you would begin to discover that what you thought of as the Earth is but a porous floating crust of firm detritus upon a thick layer of slushy silicate. A thin film of cooled minerals on a molten substrate. Descend deep into the Earth, and you'll find temperatures and pressures thousands to millions of times what we experience on the surface, rewriting everything you thought you knew about the normal states of matter on Earth. There's a lot more to the Earth than we can see or touch. It has a diameter, 8,000 miles, making it somewhere around 4,000-mile range from the surface to the core, yet the deepest hole we've ever drilled is a measly 7.5 miles deep. It took over 20 years to get that deep, and fun fact, they were still bringing up plankton fossils halfway down, which either means that the surface of the Earth goes through some pretty extreme changes over time, or burrowing plankton have been mining the planet of all its precious mineral resources, leaving the Earth a porous, hollow shell about to implode like a Florida sinkhole. And while it might sometimes surprise us that our planetary arrangement isn't entirely stable, it is likewise amazing how stable it can be. Even more amazing that it's been around long enough for somebody to want to invent This Week in Science. Coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind I can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Kiki and Blair.
And a good science to you too, Justin, Blair, and everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. We're back. We have science, right? We brought science to the science show. Yeah, science from the past week. And there is so much for us to talk about. I have stories that are of an earthen nature and also, psychedelics, because those are fun. Pretty much. All right, Justin, what did you bring?
I have medieval torture versus practice by the Department of Corrections. I have shortest story I think I've ever brought to This Week in Science. Shortest story yet. A new pill. And by pill, you know what I mean. There's a new one. And also, people who put people over country or region tend to be better neighbors.
Interesting. We'll find out more about all of this coming up. Blair, what is in the animal corner?
I have some amazing alliteration for you today. I brought crazy catnip, freaky frogs, and severed slugs.
Severed slugs. It sounds like it should be one of those awesome, stick your hand in the bowl of eyeballs kind of Halloween party gags. But it's science. And that's what we're here for. We also have an interview tonight with Jess Phoenix. It's going to be coming up after our intro stories. We got some stories to talk about. And Jess, if you feel like chiming in on any of them, feel free to comment at will.
Oh, right. It may just involve saying the word lava a whole bunch, but, I can swing that.
Lava. Yes.
Lava.
Or maybe magma. Wait.
Liquid hot magma.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. All right, everyone. As we dive into the program tonight, I would like to remind you that you can find TWIS on YouTube, on Facebook, and Twitch. Look for This Week in Science and subscribe. You can also subscribe to us as a podcast, all places that podcasts are found, like, your mobile device when you hit the buttons. But you got to look for This Week in Science. You can also find us at our website, twis.org. Okay, stories. I have a little advice from the science world for my first story.
Oh, good. I love when science tells me what to do.
Well, hopefully it's science helping to set priorities moving forward into the future. Because historically, humanity has exploited nature pretty much every chance we've gotten. It's like, oh, look, a natural resources? How can I use that? How can I take advantage of that and make some cold, hard cash? Yeah, so this is our capitalistic, I would say nature, but I think that's artificial as well. But this system that we have set up has led us to take advantage of natural ecosystems. And now we take and exploit natural lands for agriculture, for housing, for human expansion and use all over the place. Researchers publishing in Nature Sustainability this week have found, looking at 62 sites around the world, they've discovered that, I don't know, Blair, this doesn't seem too far-fetched. I want you to let me know and bring me back to earth here. Conserving and restoring nature is often more valuable than converting it for human use.
That makes sense.
It does. So they have taken many of these sites and used a measure they called TWIS. It's a measure that's been around, a system for checking ecosystems' value based on their carbon storage capacity, based on their biodiversity capacity, all sorts of things related to that. And for the large part of the 62 sites that they looked at, it's better to leave them natural to absorb all of the carbon and hold on to that carbon rather than converting it for human use. And that the money that would be gained from agriculture or other human uses is not as much, and plus the cost of the carbon that would be turned over and released into the atmosphere, it's not as much as what would be saved by just saving the natural ecosystem.
Of course. Well, because every living thing has many roles in an ecosystem. And if you're converting it for human use, you're usually capitalizing on one role, right? Mm-hmm. As a carbon source, or as a space taker, or as food, or as a trophy, or as any number of things, right? But each living thing is eaten and does eat or consume and respirates in some way and takes a space, but also converts space and does all sorts of things within their niche that is a lot more than just kind of one layer.
Yeah, I like that comment, Blair, that that when we use it for human uses, it's often for one purpose, whereas the natural purpose or the natural use is so multi-purposed. That the biodiversity that you would be conserving is valuable, that conserving natural lands is valuable. And while this study out of University of Cambridge, in collaboration with scientists around the world, did do a lot of comparisons related to the value per ton of carbon, right? So how many dollars do we assess this to be if carbon storage capacity is what we're... Because they did take that economic look at it, but it's just overall much more valuable in general. And they did find that there were some that where commodity crops were involved, that was a question, where it didn't seem that it was necessarily more valuable to keep it as a natural ecosystem. But for the large part, forest, wetland, many locations, just leave them biodiverse, leave them natural. Nature benefits humanity.
I mean, it's kind of crazy, right? Like nature actually did a really good job of engineering itself. And when we show up and crash the party, it's like, yeah, we weren't really expecting you to like actually terraform the planet in the opposite sense of terraforming. Like we're not making it like Earth, we're making it like a horrible dead thing.
Terra deconstruction.
There you go. There you go.
Coining new phrases every week on This Week in Science. Hey, Justin, after this advice, what do you have for us?
What was the story I was going to bring first? Did you say there in the rundown somewhere?
Yeah, something about a pill.
Not just any pill. The pill. Okay.
Are you talking about the pill, like birth control? Is that
I'm talking about the pill. Like when somebody says it, it's the pill. There isn't, then you don't have to ask which pill. You know exactly what they mean. If somebody takes any other pill, they have to explain what pill that was. There's another word that you put with it. This one, just the pill. So we're going, thanks to, this is something published in Nature Communications, there's going to be another pill, it sounds like. Or at least there's one underway. This is the Lindquist Institute. Investigator Wei Yan and research colleagues have discovered another pill for men. Natural compound, they say, is safe, effective, and reversible. The compound is tryptonide, which can either be purified from an herb where it is naturally produced, or it can be produced chemically through chemical synthesis. Male infertility in this, it's pretty amazing. Within 3 to 6 weeks that you reach infertility, and once you stop taking it, fertility returns in 4 to 6 weeks. The daily oral dose. It's not hormone related. There's no hormone involved.
Yeah.
That.
Yes. That.
Are you, Jess is in. She's like, yes.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. Am I the only one that want men to feel what it's like to be on the pill?
No, so here's the thing. Whoa. Men have been working on a male pill all this time. I mean, we invented one, much like the one that you take, but it wasn't quite ready for human consumption. So we kept working.
The important factor probably being that not so permanent influence on reproduction.
Noticeable toxic effects were detected in either a short or a long time treatment. These are preclinical animal studies that they've used so far. All the data suggests that it is a highly promising non-hormonal male contraceptive agent, and it seems to meet all of the criteria. Its bioavailability is there, its efficacy, reversibility, the safety, all of these things.
If it's not hormonal, what does it do? How does it work?
So what it is there's an assembly process that takes place in sperm, multi-step assembly process. And what they basically did was they created a protein that disrupts one of the final phases.
Wow.
So,
but it's not, they didn't create, I mean, what's it called? The tryptonide is the protein, but this was like an active compound from an herb that was being used for some other purpose. And then men started saying, I've got infertility issues because they were taking this herb and they were like, maybe we can take advantage of this.
This is a quotey voice from Dr. Yan. Thanks to decades of basic research, which inspired us to develop the idea that a compound that targets a protein critical to the last several steps of the sperm assembly would lead to the production of non-functional sperm without causing severe depletion of testicular cells. We are very excited that the new idea worked and that this compound appears to be an ideal male contraceptive. Our results using non-injurious studies on lower primates suggest tryptonide will be an effective treatment for human males as well. Hopefully, we'll be able to start human clinical trials soon to make the non-hormonal male contraceptive a reality.
This is very cool. I do wish it were a patch or something that was not a daily pill.
Yeah.
Without getting too in the weeds here, let me just say, I think one of the reasons that women get really good at taking the pill every day is that they have a lot to lose. They're the one that's going to have to carry a child, right? And so I have concerns about the habit forming. I'm sure it's possible. Men take other pills for their health all the time.
Yep.
But I would feel if I was in the situation though where I was depending on my partner to take a daily pill, I might prefer it was a patch. That's all I'm saying. I might prefer it was not a daily requirement.
Okay, so here's the thing. You would still, I would assume, if you weren't completely familiar and prepared, everybody would be on their own pill, right? I mean, that's there is some mild thread of men being able to control their reproductive but
I think when you're talking about relationships and people who are in partnerships with each other, you have a lot of trust there. And so I would trust my partner to take a pill on a daily basis if that was something he were willing to do. And I would, I can't wait to be able to have that conversation.
Yeah, right.
That is true. It would be nice, especially without hormones in the mix.
There's no hormones. I mean, and it doesn't seem like
affected differently, right? So if
and we know how bad hormone
never had
side
a problem
effects
being
are.
on the pill and likes the pill and doesn't have the side effects, it's like it's fine, fine, whatever.
But I
if
think
you
it's
have somebody who's like really it's causing them grief, then there's something men can do to jump in there and be part of that as well.
But I think it's like, at first it's like trust but verify. You're like, okay,
exactly. Yes,
we're going to make an effort, but let me just make sure there's like fewer pills in the little thing than there were the day before, just to until you get in the habit.
I'm going to check those every day.
Yeah.
Sweetie, did you take your pill?
Yeah. I mean, I already asked if you gave the dog a pill, so it's like, all right, just one more step in the process.
Take yours. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, moving away from the pill, let's move to mosquitoes, Blair.
Yes. Mosquitoes.
Another pain.
Another pain. And the best way to prevent yourself from getting attacked by mosquitoes is a lot of harsh chemicals like DEET, which can like disintegrate clothing. It's kind of a big deal, right? But a study from Northwestern University and Lund University looked at the effect of catnip as an insect repellent. Catnip has long been known for its repellent nature on insects, mosquitoes in particular. And catnip has been used since the time of Pliny the Elder in warding off insects. So there's an active ingredient in catnip called nepetalactone.
Nepetalactone.
And that has been used for a while, for millennia. But these researchers wanted to actually look, is it as effective as DEET and how does it work? And so the catnip, member of the mint family, didn't know that. They found that there are actually receptors that mosquitoes have that create this bad reaction to catnip. So this is a totally natural way to do this, where you don't have to have this kind of modern chemical that you make in a lab, right?
You can rub yourself all over with catnip and become a human cat toy and not be bitten by mosquitoes.
You won't be bitten by mosquitoes. You might be covered in scratches because you're a human scratching coach now, but you won't have mosquito bites. So what they found is that the nepetalactone activates an irritant receptor, TRPA1, which is a pain receptor found in animals, flatworms, fruit flies, even humans. It's known as the wasabi receptor. But unlike wasabi or garlic compounds that activate these receptors in humans, catnip only activates the insect receptor. Now, on the opposite side, we don't know why cats like catnip. There's theories. They think that there might be something with an active ingredient and component that somehow interacts with the reward center of the cat brain. I think we talked about that on the show. Actually,
I brought a story about it. Yeah,
or not too long ago. But that's totally separate, completely different chemical process. This guy, the catnip, is dealing with this wasabi receptor, which I love that. So it's kind of hurty to be near the catnip if you're a mosquito. It doesn't feel good.
I'm going to plant catnip all over my yard. Come to me, cats. Stay away, mosquitoes.
Yes.
I'm just picturing though, like the cat lady from The Simpsons, like just, I don't know, mosquitoes are just running away and the cats are coming in. It seems like pretty dramatic. I think someone could do a dramatization for us.
Yes. The pretty dramatic response actually was their final test of this phase, which I love, which was they offered mosquitoes a blood meal in a dish that was covered in a nylon sock that was doused in catnip. Okay. They went nowhere near that. They had a wind tunnel where they had experiments where volunteers put their whole hand in a cage with live mosquitoes, and they either had or did not have catnip all over their hand. And it was effective. So yes, talk about that dramatization. Just stick your hand into a box full of mosquitoes.
I want someone to dance this PhD. For sure.
Oh, yes.
It'll be amazing.
Yeah, so plant some catnip. You'll have some natural insect repellent potential.
Yeah. Although if you're going on a long hike out in the wilderness and you're trying to repel mosquitoes this way, make sure it's not in an area where there's like mountain lions.
Jess, you've done a lot of field research. You're part of the Explorers Club. Have you ever climbed Mount Everest?
No. And actually, this is going to sound like sacrilegious to a lot of folks, but I have no interest in doing it.
Well, who knows? Maybe there is stuff to be discovered geologically on the top of Mount Everest. A new study that is out this week is really interesting. I found it so fascinating. Researchers were thinking about early Earth. Okay, after we were hot and molten, we got water from somewhere. There was a lot of water on our planet. And it's thought now that there's like an ocean's worth of water caught up in the rocks of the mantle, like a whole ocean. Yeah. And so the question is like, all right, okay, that's good. How did that get there? And has it always been there? What was it doing? And so these researchers looking into this question of the early Earth and water, they have come to the opinion based on their assessment of heat and rocks that are in the mantle and how well they hold on to water, published in the American Geological Union, that Earth might have been covered by enough water to submerge Mount Everest. Mount Everest, or that distance, 21,000, 19,000 feet into away from Earth level. Like, I'm just imagining how much extra water that would be, but Mount Everest could have been submerged at some point in the early Earth. But then
wasn't
what
Mount
happened
Everest
to
a lot shorter back then?
It would have
or
been
they
much
mean
shorter.
Today's
back then,
Mount
yes.
Everest would have been able, or are they saying back then it would have been? Because then it's not as impressive.
If Mount Everest had been on the Earth,
where it is now,
it would have been covered by water.
It's just some social math trying to explain the height.
Yes. That the Earth was a water planet in its early stages. And these geophysicists are convinced, based on their assessment of rocks and how they hold water at different temperatures, that the rocks, when the Earth was younger, were really, really hot. And because they were really hot, they were unable to hold water. And then, because there was so much water on top of the planet, that the pressure of that water could have cracked the surface, the crust, and led to the formation of the plates as plates ended up breaking and not flexing like they do now, but actually breaking and getting submerged under one another. And that would bring the crust into the mantle along with water, and that as the water made its way into the mantle, it would have cooled, and the planet was just cooling anyway. And over time, the Earth was a big sponge. As it cooled, it was like your kitchen sponge going, I'm going to soak up all this water. And that's how it ended up with a whole ocean's worth of water stuck in the rocks below our feet.
I mean, that's plausible. I can see where they're going with it. There are some minerals that are known as hydrophilic. They love water and they carry water, like mica. Mica is one of those minerals. But the mantle, there's a lot of peridotite, which is very rich in olivine. And so it's a kind of rock that's got a lot of these mineral in it that is very green and very shiny and very pretty. And that's what we see really commonly in the mantle. So they probably were studying the peridotite and the other surrounding materials and saying, yeah, you know what? this seems like an idea, because we still are learning a lot about plate tectonics and what it means. I mean, all of geology has made huge strides in the last 100 years. I mean, continental drift was still the prevailing theory when my mom took geology in college in the 60s. So, like, I mean, we've come a long way since then. So
wait. So it's not continental drift anymore? What is it?
It's plate tectonics. Yes.
Plate tectonics. Okay, there we go.
It drifted on out. Now we've got a better theory, and this stuff is a lot more active than just, ooh, we're drifting away. Now it's like, oh no, there's convection in the mantle. It's a whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea that there is water beneath the surface and that it's caught up in the rocks as part of the molecular structure of the rocks. That, like, when I first learned that, I was like, what? This is madness. But how amazing that there is this water cycle where water can move from the surface to the atmosphere, back to the surface, into the mantle, come back up. Like, the whole process to me is fascinating. It's amazing.
I'm surprised we have any water or any land. There's such a good chance of not having any of both. If the Earth was a little more spongy, no water on the surface.
True. Yeah.
If it was a little more wet, it didn't have to be that much more wet. No land.
No land.
That's got lucky.
Yeah. One of the researchers in an interview posted over on the Science Magazine's news website said that the Earth is just such a delicate place, and that that if any of this had been different, we wouldn't be where we are. Too much water or too little, and it wouldn't work. So
yeah, then I'd have gills and webbed fingers, which would be really cool.
Oh my God, Kevin Costner in Waterworld, he was a historian, not an actor. Oh God, no. Oh God, no.
Okay, Justin, tell me the shortest story ever.
All right. Sure. So this peer-reviewed study in the American Journal of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene by a team of social scientists and infectious disease experts at the CDC, University of Albany, Northeastern University, Health Partners Institute, and the University of Minnesota, they found that skyrocketing costs of antiparasitic drugs in the U.S. is leading to skyrocketing parasites in U.S. citizens.
Right. People can't afford the drugs.
That's the whole story.
So parasites.
The price of the antiparasitic drug went up. The number of parasites in people went up. Now, it could be just a correlation. Further research may be needed. But I think that one's
pretty
kind of
food prices go up. People are hungry.
Moving on. Since Jess is with us, I decided to go with more Earth-based geologic type stories today. And I have a story out of Columbia University from the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory. Researchers there looked at eruptions larger than Mount Pinatubo in the last 1,000 years to kind of see how these eruptions affect climate. We know that volcanic eruptions can affect temperature, that the material that ends up in the atmosphere can block light. Mount Pinatubo resulted in a degree Celsius decrease in temperature over 15 months, which is extreme. It's significant. So they were looking at eruptions over the last 1,000 years, much bigger than this. And I find it very interesting about the news right now because Iceland is like experiencing a whole bunch of micro tremors, and it's like, ooh, might have an eruption out of southern Iceland sometime soon. We've got Mount Etna rumbling and glowing, and then Hawaii is constantly doing its thing, growing. Anyhow, these researchers found that in addition to cooling effects, there can be dramatic changes to the distribution of rainfall for up to a decade after really large eruptions. So they found in areas more equatorial that there was a drying effect. So there was a less rainfall in equatorial regions, Africa, etc. And then over Oceania and more poleward, the rain was redistributed. So there was more rain away from into the temperate regions away from the equator. It's just a very interesting study, and they used tree rings to tell them about this. So they looked at how the tree rings were mapping onto rainfall and growth and looking back 1,000 years. And it's not just right here, right now, human activity that might be, and transport chains of fruit from Africa to Europe that might be disrupted by an Icelandic eruption. It could be our entire climactic system for a very long period of time.
Yeah, volcanoes will mess you up. That's the short version. That's the shortest study there. Volcanoes will mess you up. Done.
Yep, done.
Yeah, well, but you can't really complain if you're living on Hawaii or Iceland, because there wouldn't be a Hawaii or an Iceland if it wasn't for the volcanic activity that made the island. So you're kind of stuck with having to just live with it.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
As an inhabitant of the Ring of Fire in Portland, Oregon, I'm very much aware of the volcanoes that are around and great skiing that they bring.
Great skiing, yes. They have their eye on you. They are watching you.
Yeah, well, every time I drive over the Willamette River, I take a look at Mount St. Helens, which was a nice little disruptive eruption. Yes.
Yeah, and that was a pretty small one, compared to the ones that can happen. It wasn't small for the people nearby, but in the, geologic scheme of things, the Earth can do a lot more. And yeah, that would make sense that it would affect rainfall, because it definitely, the particulates, the aerosols and everything, there's a lot of that stuff that gets ejected.
Yeah. Yeah, I just found it thinking about water in the mantle, and then thinking about water in the skies and how volcanoes are a big part of that cycle. I thought the two stories kind of wrapped it together, bookended it a little nicely for the cycles in our Earth. Oh, hey, this is This Week in Science. If you just tuned in, thank you so much for being a part of the show tonight. And thank you for joining us. If you like the show, it would be really helpful to us if you told other people about This Week in Science. Tell other people. Bring more people to the science. Be pretty cool. We like new friends. Okay, and now I would like to officially introduce our guest for the evening. Volcano Jess Phoenix is a geologist specializing in volcanoes and natural hazards. She likes danger zones and explodey rocks, apparently. She is an elected fellow in the Explorers Club. Jess has performed research around the world and has worked on projects funded by the United States Geological Survey, National Geographic, Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, the National Science Foundation, and many more. And we had her on the show several years ago to talk about the environmental science nonprofit that was co-founded, Blueprint Earth. And now, Miss Adventure is here with a book. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. When you were like, yes, I'll have you on the show again, I was like, woohoo, these guys are a good time. So I am happy to be here. I can't believe I wrote a book, and it's like not a science textbook. It's a fun book. So even better to talk about something fun after the last several years of less than fun for science.
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of start with that, because when we talked with you, it was 2016, and the crazy progression of events in the United States and elsewhere, things had not yet occurred. And you were working on Blueprint Earth. We talked about Blueprint Earth, and we were like, yes, love the idea. This is super cool. What have you done? What have you been doing?
Well, Blueprint Earth is still a thing, although we had to pause our expeditions because of COVID. Thank you, COVID. Which sucks, because we were actually doing a really big expedition at the end of it was supposed to be May last year, and for just returning researchers. So it was going to be like, let's get some of the gang back together. And it was going to be so cool, and we didn't get to do it, and it was sad. And we haven't done any expeditions since last January. So it's been over a year. And this is the time of year where normally I would be on an expedition right now, because our expeditions in the spring have always coincided with university and college spring break. So it's like So considering how everybody else has been doing in the pandemic, I've been doing all right. And so I'm grateful for that. I have been running for Congress, which I did in 2018. I mean, I started in 2017 because the secret about running for office is that it will suck onto 18 months of your life like a vampire. And you'll be so drained afterwards that, like, seriously, after the primary, and I did not win the primary, otherwise I would be like in Congress right now. It would have happened.
Yep.
I immediately got asked to go to Iceland on a circumnavigation, like, expedition cruise to film a documentary about Margaret Atwood's life. And I'm like, wait, I just got a call to do what now? To go hang out on volcanoes with Margaret Atwood above the Arctic Circle? Like,
This sounds
okay.
amazing.
Yeah, I'm like, oh darn, I will cry that I didn't keep going into Congress. Like, shucks. And then I basically went to Yellowstone to do something else for science. And then I went to Indonesia to do another thing for science. And then I ended up going to Greece on vacation. And I was like, and I still wasn't recovered from running for Congress. It took me at least a year to like get back to feeling like a normal person because it took that much out of me. It was nuts. So I'm glad we have a new occupant of the White House. We'll put it that way.
So your platform, though, you were bringing science or trying to bring science to Congress, and how was that? How was your run? And
I will tell you, nothing is in the world is quite as terrifying. And I work with like explodey lava bombs. So like that is my day job.
I was going to say, how much scarier can...
when you trend on the front page of Reddit, because a podcast you were on, it was the Wired podcast. I did an interview with one of the journalists there. And the headline was, "This scientist wants to bring Star Trek values to Congress." I think people lost their collective minds. And so I was in New York then, and I remember getting all these messages all of a sudden. They were all popping up on my phone. People going, "Did you know you're trending on Reddit? Did you know you're number one on Reddit?" And I'm like, oh God. And, but honestly, the best place in the world to have a momentary freak out that like, oh my God, all of Reddit knows who I am for this, 30-minute period is New York. Because in New York, no one cares. It's amazing. Like the guy driving the taxi cab's like, "Get out of the way. I don't care if you're trending on Reddit." It was wonderfully grounding. But no, it was freaky because there are creepy people on the internet who are involved in politics, which I know it sounds like a shocker, but I had one guy who, after some of my appearances gained a lot of traction, who started to write emails to the campaign and post on all my Twitter posts that I would make, all the tweets, and say like, "I own a white van. It has no windows, and I'm outside of your campaign headquarters." And he was like, "I want to make a suit out of your skin." And I'm like, "Okay, Buffalo Bill, this is creepy."
Wow, what?
Yeah. So I'm like super good at dealing with internet trolls now, but my God, I did not have to want to think about skin suit me. No, I look better as a person.
There's politics. There's being a scientist in politics, which is already something that isn't the norm.
Yeah.
And then there's being a female scientist in politics, which sounds exhausting.
Yeah, but it was also cool. Like, I don't want everyone to think that it wasn't cool. In fact, I see in the comments that I've been looking at them that actually I recognize at least one of my political supporters is here. Hi, John. And he was a supporter back then, and I don't think he wanted to make me into a skin suit. So we are like super cool. But I have made amazing friends and connections, and I met so many young people who were just like, they were empathetic, they were caring, they wanted to learn how to tell fake news from real news and facts from lies. And just seeing that, I'm like, okay, I didn't have to win to see a change happening. Yeah. And so and hey, you know what? I would have been the person at the Capitol insurrection who's like, let me go and reason with them, which is not what I should have, So yeah, I think that they would have been like, no, run away right now. These people are loony. So I think that I think I'm where I need to be. And like, I think most people end up where they need to be. And right now writing a book and still doing science work and communicating science and running a nonprofit and, you know, enjoying my husband and my pets. So life is pretty good over here. So
did you learn anything from the run in politics that you could share with people who, you know, maybe other scientists who are interested potentially in getting into politics? Were there any lessons that you can share?
Yes. And this is actually like probably the most valuable advice I could possibly give anyone, aside from just saying, please get involved. Please, I know it's onerous, but read up on local races, school boards, city councils, like those matter. Even if you're in a very small town, that matters even more. But read up on that, stay informed. But if you do want to run, the best thing you can do, the thing that is more valuable than any consultants or any mailers, any TV spots, is actually pounding the pavement and talking to people, because you can convince somebody who has views that are completely on the opposite end of the spectrum from yours to vote for you because you spent 5 minutes and you really listened to what they had to say. So where I was running, my district is enormous. It's been gerrymandered all to hell, and it's like 90 miles across. So trying to get to physically see a good chunk of people in the district was a huge challenge. It's very different than a district like where Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is, which is a really small, densely packed district.
Yeah.
So if you live in a densely packed district, you'll have an advantage because you can pound the pavement much more effectively. If your district is sprawling, then you need to start way before you ever announce your run. And you need to start going and meeting people saying, I'm going to run. Can I get your support? It doesn't start the day you announce. It starts like 2 years before you announce.
Did you start 2 years before telling people you were going to run?
No, I didn't know I was going to run until January of 2017, and I announced in April. So, and all the advice I got between January and April was basically useless. When I did things the way that I wanted to do things, not the traditional consulting route, but when I said, let me go online, let me do my own social media, please, then it worked really well.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's just because the way that politics is done is really good for traditional politicians. It's not good for scientists and people who are tech and media savvy.
Yeah.
So
I think those are some really, really good things to think about. Thanks for that. All right. So you ran, you kept going after running. You've done all sorts of expeditions and TV shows, and you've written this book. What led to you sitting down and going, I have some stories to tell, and I want to tell them?
Well, I have known some really cool people throughout my life. One of whom, her name is Madeline Blaze, and I met her when I was like a 14 or 15-year-old. She was introduced to my parents through a mutual friend, and she had kids my age and my brother's age. So we got to know them a little bit, and just we would go back east for vacations and we'd meet them. And Maddie is a Pulitzer Prize winning author and journalist, and she's phenomenal. And she was always somebody I respected. So at one point I said, I've been doing all this work on volcanoes and people seem to think that's kind of cool. Maybe I should write a book. And she went, yes, you should definitely write a book. However, why don't you write a book and get a degree for it at the same time? And I went, huh? Like, I'm a scientist. What do you mean? I don't need another degree. And she said, well, you can get an MFA at a low residency MFA program. And I went, ooh, that sounds like fun. Like more letters after the name. So
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And she was adjunct faculty at Goucher College in Maryland. And so I applied, and for some reason they let me in. And so I started the program January 2017. And then I started running for Congress while I was starting an MFA program. So this book was largely written while I was also running for Congress. And
wow.
I'll tell you, it kept me sane. Both things. Like the book kept me sane with Congress. Congress kept me sane with the book. So I finished it after the run was finished. But I just thought it was cool to be able to share these places that a lot of people will never be able to see. Honestly, I mean, I can try to make certain things accessible to people who may be physically incapable of visiting spots like this, or not have the finances, or not have the training. And so I'm kind of like, I feel like I have a duty, because I go to these places, to share the experience however I can with people who can't go.
As we talked about as a female scientist running for Congress, but let's talk about as a female scientist doing field studies in these remote places, doing science with volcanoes. And can you talk about that experience a bit?
Oh my God. Just the whole experience in general, or like a specific aspect of it? Because it's not something that comes naturally to me, and probably doesn't for most people, right? Like, we live our lives pretty well sheltered from the remote, at least in countries where we're probably streaming this show right now. Most of us have a pretty urbanized, or even if we're in a rural area, it's more urbanized than like the jungle or, a mountain peak like we were talking about earlier. So I think that for me, every time I go on an expedition, it's a learning experience. And even though now I've led dozens of expeditions all over the world, it's something I had to learn. I didn't know how to camp. Okay. Like, I was 23 and did not know how to set up a tent. So when I went on my first expedition, and I was like, oh, what's a camelback? And I'm like, I have a water bottle. It's an Nalgene. Isn't that good enough? And I didn't understand.
Everyone has to start somewhere.
I didn't know what sock liners were. I did not know how to go to the bathroom outside. I did not know. So, gentlemen, I know you've all got an advantage in the going to the bathroom outside.
Half the time.
Yeah, that's true. Half the time. But then again, a gentleman or people with gentleman equipment, they have an advantage. I have since learned that there are amazing things that women and female equipped persons can use to make the experience easier. But I'll tell you, like, it was really sobering to me to realize that there were people who were so comfortable with outdoor stuff. And I was sitting there having like a crisis, going like, how do you poo outside? Like, we are so removed from the natural world. I do address that in my book. I literally talk about pooing, and I fell in a sewer at one point in my career. That's also in the book, because then I had to go on a crazy expedition with my leg non-functional. So, there's a lot of very base humor that's involved in fieldwork. So even though we have these really like high-minded scientific principles of like, I'm going to understand volcanic hazards better, or I'm going to contribute to our knowledge about climate change. Yeah, no, a lot of it's just poo. I hate to break it to you.
Well, we're human, right? And you end up in a situation where you don't have all the trappings of society, of a city, and you have to make do with what you have. And so I think the base humor is that's taking it down to that, finding something funny in that base human layer that we all share.
You have to, or you just, there are so many situations where everything seems impossible when you're in the field, and you have to come up with a creative solution to a problem that you never in your wildest dreams would have thought occurred. You're like, how is this happening? And then in the moment you have to think of, okay, who do I need to keep calm? Who do I need to keep safe? What are my priorities here? Can I accomplish any of them and still get out safely? Like so you do that. And the only way you can swing it is by having a ridiculous sense of humor.
Okay. So wait. So now I've got it's getting too general. Okay. Because
let's go specific.
It went from somewhere like, okay, we're going to go camping. And now I got to keep my sense of humor to get out of here. Okay. Between those 2 points, something happened.
Yes.
So what are you doing on these expeditions to volcanoes?
Okay, so there are a few different ways that people can get data on things like a volcano. We know where they are. They generally don't leave unless you got real problems. And so in the US in particular, there are volcano observatories. And in a lot of countries around the world, that's what they do. They task some scientists to be specialists on that particular volcano or group of volcanoes. And they basically divide into gas geochemistry, geophysics, gas, or I already said gases. We're just talking about gases again. Seismology, physical volcanology. So there's a whole bunch of different aspects that we look at. And the best way to think about it is volcanoes are sort of like a human body in that they have different outputs that we can measure. So like with people, you can measure your blood pressure, you can check your heart rate, you can listen to your breathing, you can test your blood chemistry. So we can do similar things with volcanoes. And so when you've got an observatory in place, then that's your base of operations. You go to the observatory for work every day and you go take your measurements and you see if anything changes, and you can test hypotheses because everything, you know where it all is. Now, if you're not lucky enough to have an observatory near a volcano, most countries, and I think I don't know of any that have volcanoes near human populations that don't have monitoring. Most countries at least have a seismograph in place, you know, or a seismometer that prints out a seismograph. So they can basically keep a finger on the pulse of the volcano. Just if something gets all weird, then they can say, hey, people in the neighborhood, you need to know that this is going south. So,
and so how weird are these volcanoes though? I mean, is it just, there's some seismic activity once in a while? Is it they're still spewing out really hot, poisonous, toxic gases or stuff? Like, there's probably the whole variety depending on which volcano is getting looked at. So I'm picturing some observation points. That's right up on the volcano. Right now, that's fine. Nothing's going to happen. We'll just watch everything from right here. Others, you might be maybe keeping a distance.
Yes, because volcanologists do die while doing their job. That's a thing that happens. In fact, in 1991, Mount Unzen in Japan erupted and it actually killed 3 volcanologists, a married couple and then another man. And it killed them in a pyroclastic flow. And pyroclastic flows are, I don't know, did you all see, I think it was the second Jurassic World? It's where Chris Pratt is like running away from an erupting volcano and he's like booking it and there's dinosaurs running next to him. The thing he's running from is a pyroclastic flow. Those actually can move up to 500 miles an hour. So Chris Pratt would be toast.
Fast. I did not know he was that fast. That guy can move. That guy can really move.
He had the Star-Lord moves in Jurassic World, apparently. No one asks the volcanologist before they put this stuff in the movie. And they're like, oh yeah, he'll get away from it. And I'm like, nope. He's dead.
Well, they didn't ask animal trainers about the raptor training in that movie either, so that's a whole nother.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot. Call us. But yeah, so sometimes we have to balance the risk that we take with getting up close and personal to get, let's say, a sample of lava or ash or gas that we can't get from a distance. That is the risk going to be too much for the reward? Because the ultimate goal of volcanology is to better understand volcanoes to save lives and property. Because this is a really important point. And I've recently been like, I need to tell everyone, there are no such things as natural hazards. There are hazards that are hazardous to humans because nature, as we were talking about before, it manages itself just fine. It's when we show up and build right near the volcano or an active fault that things go bad. So
Highway 1 right now is falling into the ocean along the coast of California. It is a roadway built on both soft and hard soils right next to the ocean where erosion is taking place along a fault line. It's not a natural disaster that's taking place.
Scenic.
It's my favorite road on the planet.
Yeah.
And but I'm glad they made it. I hope they maintain it forever. But it's never going to be completely a natural disaster. It's a man-made disaster by man putting himself along a fault line, along a coast on unstable ground.
But that goes to so much of where people are because of the soils around volcanoes are usually much richer, so they're better for agriculture. There is usually the higher altitude that leads to glaciers that gives water so that you have a water source. There are all sorts of aspects of volcanoes that make them these lush, beautiful places, a lot of times, not all the time, that people want to live. And so we have around the world put so many communities in danger. I drive through the Pacific Northwest all the time and I'm like, why am I here? Why are we here? What are we doing here? This is beautiful.
Yeah. And volcanoes are gorgeous. I mean, in my career, I've been able to work in Hawaii, in Iceland, in Nicaragua, in Peru, Ecuador, Indonesia, Tanzania, like all through the Mediterranean. Like, these are not ugly places. Like,
No.
well, then again, you ask me and I'm like, I love everything. So there are no ugly places, just ugly things people do to places. But it's like, that's one of the reasons I went into volcanology, is because I fell in love with the volcanoes the first time I set foot on them. I mean, they are so incredible. You cannot deny their power. And if you think about it, like, sure, that, you know, ancient peoples settled near them because of the fertile land and oftentimes access to water. But I mean, you also have a really strong tradition of volcanoes being tied to deities and being things that were worshipped and or feared and or praised in places all around the world. So this is sort of like a universal reverence for the natural world that also, I think, informed where a lot of people may have settled and how they coped with living near a spot like that.
Have you just had a number of run-ins as a female scientist that you're like, this is ridiculous and dangerous and I want to go home now?
It's a good question. Honestly, not from just by virtue of being female. The only times I've ever been like, I want to go home now, have been if I'm really cold. I don't like being really cold. Like right now, my hand is really cold. I have bad circulation. So when I work in cold areas, like when I was doing some work in Peru and we got snowed in, I was like, I will never be warm again. And we were up like over 16,000 feet high for several weeks. So, and I was injured. I had the leg injury from falling in a sewer. Don't recommend it. So I just, like, that time, that's when I wanted to go home. But I've always been pretty fortunate. I mean, I've had some moments where in retrospect, it's like, oh, that could have been really bad. But again, it's always the people. It's never the volcano or the mountain or, you know, it's just when people are acting sketchy. And so I have been on trips where people have been armed as security because you need to be. In fact, actually, it's common even close to home. Some of the women who went to Cal State LA, which is where I did my master's, when they would do their field work in the Mojave Desert, they would take weapons, firearms with them because they were out by themselves for extended periods of time. And they're like, there are basically, I always tell our students when we do research in the Mojave, I tell them there are 3 M's in the Mojave Desert. There is meth, mining, and the military. So yeah, the military is fine. The meth, not so much.
Not
and the
so
mining,
much.
yeah, well, some of the mining's legal, some isn't. So, you know.
So on the other side of this is dangerous people you might come into contact with while out in the field as a single scientist or even with a team. But in the biological sciences right now, there is a big push, and there have been papers, letters that have been written that have been published in the last couple of weeks by groups of people who are trying to change the culture of field science in biology to make it safer for women, because out in the field, things happen and people talk about abuses all the time. And is that something that has ever been a concern to you? And is it a concern with the field of geology and volcanology in general?
I think any group these days that thinks that it wouldn't be a concern for them is like lying to themselves. We have, and you know, this show right now has a lot of female input, but we can probably all speak to experiences. I mean, even just the last couple of weeks, I had dudes catcalling me, and I'm like, I'm wearing cargo pants. Like, stop it. You know, I'm walking into the grocery store. Leave me alone. Just because you're wearing a mask doesn't mean I can't see your eyes. But it's like this stuff is so pervasive that it just became so normalized not to address it, that I think that, yeah, geology and biology, any field science really needs to think about how they're keeping not just, students who aren't male safe, but students who are students of color or students who don't look like whatever the people in the area look like. And I mean, I know students of color who want to do carnivore ecology, but who aren't comfortable studying bears in, the western part of the United States because they are looked at with suspicion if they're in rural communities. And I mean, I saw it happen. I've been out in the field in California in some of the more rural areas with colleagues of color, and we've gone into restaurants and they get treated terribly and I get served just fine. And I mean, it is a problem. So, because I run a field research program, I try really hard to make sure that the culture at the top is a supportive, positive culture that is open. And I mean, I think we've worked with over 350 students now. We've taken them out to the field for expeditions ranging from like 5 days to 8 or 9 days. And it's been like 26 or 27 expeditions. I can't even remember now. But our students, by and large, have had positive experiences. I mean, there have been a few who've been like, I'm super homesick. I've never done this before. I'm freaking out. Like, I have to go. But that's most
different.
Part, yeah, it's very different. And I think it's also because at the top of the organization, we have no tolerance for things that are not, that are going to make people uncomfortable. The worst we want you to be uncomfortable about is going, how do I poop in the desert? And we can help you with that. We won't help you poop, but we will help you be prepared for successful pooping. Yes.
You hope you can help them. What adventure is next on your list? I mean, you've got all sorts of adventures in here, Miss Adventure. What is next for you?
Well, I am, oh my God, nothing is certain because of COVID. But if I had my druthers, I would get to make this really awesome TV show that I have an idea for, because I filmed one, which is actually totally not in my wheelhouse. So I'm co-hosting a Discovery series that's coming out soon. They haven't given me an air date yet, or I would tell you, but it's, I am the scientific person to balance out this wonderful guy named Stell, who is an Atlantis expert. And he wants to try to see if the Atlantis myth has its origins in truth or not. So we got to go all over the Mediterranean and go to suspected sites for potential real Atlantises and either prove or disprove them based on Plato's telling of the myth. So I got to do scientific stuff.
Yeah, there's a 5-star hotel in Sardinia that I think might be crucial to the whole story. We should go there and spend like a week. It's got the pink beaches. It's really nice.
But I will say that the cool things, like I got to do some cool stuff for this. So I want to make more cool, informative TV because we got to use ground penetrating radar. We got to go on archaeological digs. I rappelled into the 3rd largest sinkhole on Earth. So, yeah. And there's only a handful of people who've done that. So that's on the show. And I don't think they had footage of the first time somebody went in it, but now we've got footage of it. And I'm telling you, like, I was the person who was like, Atlantis, come on. I mean, I was an ancient history major as an undergrad. And I was like, no, this is goofy. When we went and saw this stuff, I'm like, oh, well, maybe there's a grain of truth in it. I'm not saying we found Atlantis, but I'm not saying we didn't find Atlantis.
I mean, oceans rising and falling.
Yeah, wouldn't it be the ancient Sumerian kingdom? Isn't that the one that ended up in flooded for a long time? Also led to the flood myths. It's also one of the anyway.
We have enough content. Like, I mean, honestly, Stell ran this website called I think it was Atlantopedia. There were 2 of them within like the same 6-month period, like 10 years ago. Stell started one. And then this other guy started one, and one was .com, one was .net. And instead of fighting, they became friends. And so their powers combined and they were like Captain Atlantis. But there are actually a lot of candidates, and we would talk, like, not just on camera, like we actually got along really well. And I would be like, do you really think there was an Atlantis? And he'd be like, nah, but I wanted to come and poke holes in the myth and see if I could. And then over the course of the whole show, we were like, well, actually, maybe this could have been it. There's a lot that matches up, and it's not necessarily Sumeria, but we only went to 5 countries. So there's a lot more that we still need to go and check, for science.
Yeah. Where did the Phoenicians come from? They just showed up one day. There they were. They had letters. Where did they come from?
Under the sea.
Yes. Beautiful red, purple urns. That's what the Phoenicians were known for. At least that's what I remember from like 10th grade history. But no, so I hope to make more TV soon because I want to make more TV that has, that shows diverse scientists. That's really a big passion of mine. So I want to get out there and do a lot of that. So we shall see. But right now it's like
more of that. Mm-hmm. For your book, what do you hope that people get from your book?
So the thing that really runs through the book and runs through my work as both a scientist and a science communicator is that right now, particularly in our society, we have this real problem with ignorance as a disease. And ignorance and willful ignorance, intentional ignorance, as well as unintentional ignorance is really, it's choking so much of our potential as a society, and it literally is killing people. So, I mean, look at COVID. So we really need to fight the disease of ignorance with the cure that is curiosity. And I think that is the thing that, as humans, it doesn't matter where you're from or anything about you other than that you are a human, you're Homo sapiens. We have this inherent curiosity. We all are born curious. We're born as scientists and explorers, and we test our observations about the world around us. From the time that we can like grab stuff, we then stick it in our mouth. Oh, look, my foot. Does it taste good? Oh, look, this dog poo. Does it taste good? That's what babies do. Yeah, it doesn't taste good. But we are testing a hypothesis. And that love of learning, that innate desire to know about how we fit into the world around us, that unites all of us as humans. And if we can just keep up that enthusiasm for kids, like get them through that crucial part of middle school and into adulthood, and keep engaging adults with just being curious, asking why the mountains are where they are, why that frog is neon green, you know, like asking those questions. That is, I think, what we need to meet the challenges we have in this day and age. I mean, climate change, overpopulation. I mean, these are not small things. So if we keep asking the questions and wondering, that is what I think, that's what I want people to take from the book, is that wonder is for everyone. Curiosity is innate to all of us.
So parents, read the book, enjoy it, take these lessons to heart, stop telling your children to be quiet when they keep asking questions. And then when they ask why or how, you say, go find out.
Exactly. And it's okay to say you don't know. Yep. For everybody.
It is.
Scientists, adults, parents, youngins, say you don't know, but then go look it up or go do the research, for real research, not just like YouTube rabbit holes of like conspiracy videos. Don't do that. Ask somebody how to find factual information, how to check a source, you know, ask a librarian. They are great for that.
And librarians vote for people who will make that a priority.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
On the national stage. Yeah.
Yeah. We can all learn how to learn. We can all learn how to find good information. Jess, thank you so much. I don't want to keep you too much later.
Oh, you guys are amazing. And I love being here. And thank you so much. Yes. Stay well.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Yes. Where can people find you and information about your book?
Ooh, this is the hard copy. You can visit my website, volcanojess.com. I don't actually have a link to the book app yet because I am, trying to become a parent. But you can find me on the internet. I am ubiquitous on the internet. Jess Phoenix is my name. I am not the Olympic equestrian from Canada, or am I the Jess Phoenix who does art in Washington. Yep. I am the volcano oriented Jess. So you can find me. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. Twitter most often. It's not all science. Often I yell about politics. So, and the 90s. But it's a good time.
Because everyone has to yell about the 90s. That was a thing.
Yes. But thank you all. And if you do have volcano questions, you can contact me via volcanojess.com and ask your volcano questions.
Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Have a great night. Thanks
Bye,
for joining us. It's been great. All righty. And everyone, once again, that was Jess Phoenix. You can find her at volcanojess.com. This is This Week in Science. Thank you so much for being a part of the show, for enjoying it. And if you do enjoy it, consider supporting the show. Head over to TWIS.org, click on the Patreon link, and choose your level of support. Anyone donating $10 or more a month will get their name read at the end of the show. Unless you tell me that you don't want your name read, then I will take it off the list and you will be anonymous. But I want to read the names because your support is really what keeps the show going. And we do appreciate every cent that is sent to us. Thank you for your support. We really cannot do this show without you. All right, Blair. I think we have come to your part of the show. I think so. Yep. That's what the rundown says. It's time for Blair's Animal Corner. With Blair.
She loves our creature, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. You wanna hear about animals? She's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels. There's Animal Corner.
What you got, Blair?
I have a story that you may have seen all over the internet. So sometimes when an animal science story goes viral, I go, okay, I'm not bringing that to the show. People have seen it. They get it. But sometimes when they're especially weird or people have weird takes on them, I really like to bring them so that we can actually talk about the actual factual science of what these clickbait headlines are about. So
thank you, Blair.
Over the past couple days, I saw the headline, Sea Slug chops off own head. Sea Slug survives without head. Sea Slug regrows head. Lots of weird things. Sea Slug survives like plant without body. But ultimately, here's what's actually happening.
Okay. What's the truth? Tell
What's
us.
actually happening is also bizarre. It's great. Sea slugs, they're just the gift that keeps on giving. So these Sacoglossum sea slugs, don't say that 5 times fast. Oh my. Anyway, there are 2 species of them that have been discovered doing something truly amazing. So this was discovered by mistake, and it was in a lab. And what they saw was that they came in, they checked it on these sea slugs, they raised them from eggs, they were studying their life history, just basic stuff, and there was a slug head moving around without its body.
Okay.
But
And I mean, stuff like this happens sometimes. It's like,
yeah,
weird invertebrate thing. Who needs, like, worms? They cut themselves in half all the time and they keep going. Right?
Right. And in one case, one individual actually did it twice in their lifespan, which is pretty wild. But so what they saw was this head separated from the body, was moving on its own, which it's a slug, so sure, we can see that happening, right? Within days, the wound actually closed at the back of the head. And then they started feeding on algae. And then they began regenerating their heart. And then within about 3 weeks...
Wait, what?
They were complete again. They regenerated their entire body.
Wow.
So if they were older, couldn't quite get there. Didn't feed after they chopped off their body, and they died in about 10 days. But the younger slugs were able to completely regrow their whole body, including their heart. Just keep on trucking. So here's the other thing. The cast-off bodies. I know if everyone's shouting at me from the chat rooms and people watching and listening. Well, what happened to the body? Did the body regrow a head? No. It did not regrow a head. It's not like you chopped it in half and you got 2 slugs. No. The body eventually kind of shriveled up and stopped moving, but not right away. The headless bodies did move and react to being touched for days to months.
For days to months.
They couldn't
They're
eat.
like, I'm here. I guess I will fade away into oblivion because I can't go get food because I don't have my head sensory organ anymore.
So they think also a big reason that this is possible is that these slugs have a symbiotic relationship with algae, where they eat algae And then they can use the photosynthetic ability of the chloroplasts. They actually incorporate the chloroplasts from the algae into their body.
Yeah.
So that they
we've talked about that on the show before.
Mm-hmm.
So cool.
Yeah, so that it's a habit known as kleptoplasty, which yes, we have talked about on the show.
I stole those photosynthetic bacteria.
So this is a unique element of this, is that they have the ability to photosynthesize, which means that as a head, just a head, they can still create energy and metabolic processes to then make a whole body. They presumably could not do that if they didn't have a way to create energy without a stomach. So they do think, though, the real question is, how are you able to build this whole new body? So this suspicion is that there are some sort of stem cells at the cut end of the neck that are capable of the regeneration. But what they still don't know is why they do it. The again, hypothesis, no testing on this yet. Complete hypothesis. So this is the other thing that I saw in the news a bunch was that the headline was that this was why they were doing it. This is just a guess from the researchers, but they do know that these slugs have internal parasites that inhibit reproduction. So it is possible that they recognize that they are riddled with this parasite that means they won't be able to reproduce. They just ditch the caboose.
Did you just rhyme that?
Uh-huh. Can't reproduce? Ditch the caboose.
Ditch the caboose.
Yeah. So that's possible.
Yeah.
No research on that yet. Again, this discovery was a mistake. This is not what they were trying to look at.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, though. I saw the news all over the place as well, that the reason that they were allowing this regeneration, cut the head off to get rid of the parasites. I'm full of parasites and I have to get rid of them. Ditch the caboose, right? As you said. But that's interesting that that's not, they don't actually, it's a speculation and they don't actually have any data behind that yet.
None at all. Yes. They also don't know what cue prompts them to cut off their body or how it's done.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to go ahead and guess that it's probably a similar mechanism to how lizards chop off their tail at will. But yes, this is all stuff that needs to be studied now because this unexpected discovery was made.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that going forward, that it seems like that would be a pretty easy thing to set up experiment.
Absolutely, yeah. Infect some with parasites. Don't infect some with parasites.
Did
they all lose their head?
Rate.
Yeah.
Do parasites make sea slugs lose their heads?
Yes.
News at 11.
You got it.
So okay,
that's cool.
that's the photosynthesis aspect is really cool. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and so that's probably also why the back end lives as long as it does as well.
I was just going to say, otherwise, if you were a predator that eats slugs, you really got to chew your food, though. You can't just swallow it. It's going to keep wiggling for a month.
It'll be those cartoons that show people and animals living inside of a whale's stomach. Something that's similar to that.
Yes, exactly.
The sea slug keeps flopping in there.
Absolutely. And then, sea slugs, they're wild. They've provided so much joy to me in the animal corner. It's just, if you're feeling adventurous, go to TWIS.org and type sea slug into the search bar. You'll find some amazing stuff. But moving from sea slugs to frogs, tree frogs specifically, there are frogs that have what appear to be their very own built-in set of noise-canceling headphones. Oh. Let me explain. So, you're a frog. You're a boy frog. You want to get the attention of a girl frog. How do you do that? You sing.
Ribbit.
Yeah.
Ribbit.
But where do most frogs live? In wet places. And in wet places, especially like a rainforest, right?
There's a lot
a
of noise.
huge number of species and other sounds. Yes, the rainforest is the loudest habitat on the planet. And so places where you find frogs, often not quiet. So how do I, as a male frog on the prowl, how do I get the female frog 100 yards away to hear me and my song? How does she hear me?
Very selective hearing.
Right.
But how do you tune into her selective hearing? I mean, you got to be louder. You have to sing the nicest. What is going on?
So luckily, evolution provides a way. So the females have a method to be able to cut through all the noise and listen to just the male frogs that have a special call for them. So the way that they do that has to do with their lungs. They have a special set of lungs that, when inflated, reduce the eardrum's sensitivity to environmental noise in a specific frequency so that they can hear calls of mates.
Wait. So you're saying the females have inflatable ear sacs?
No, lungs.
Yeah, but they're like their ear sacs, their lungs. They have inflatable breath organs, breathing organs that block their ears up. Yes, like putting frequency specific cotton in their ears.
Absolutely, yes. So they actually, it works really similar to noise canceling headphones. Actually, it's a very similar property. Now, first, before I go any further, I'm going to, again, debunk something that I've seen on the internet related to this story. The cover photo is a picture of a frog with their throat engorged, right? It's expanded. It's blown up. Right. And based on this headline, inflated lungs help females hear, it would not be a surprising cognitive leap to look at this and think that's what you're looking at. But no, the picture is a male frog expanding his throat. Yeah. Yes, exactly, to call. It has nothing to do with the noise canceling features. I just wanted to throw that out there. So
good to clarify.
Yes, you're not getting too confused about, like, are there lungs in their throat? No. So anyway, I just wanted to take care of that. But
female ear lungs.
Ear lungs. In the lead author, Norman Lee of St. Olaf College in Minnesota says, quote, "In essence, the lungs cancel the eardrum's response to noise, particularly some of the noise encountered in a cacophonous breeding chorus, where the males of multiple other species also call simultaneously." So this is what I was talking about with, like, the wet place basically being the nightclub. That's where all of the frog species are calling out. And so there's a lot of noise. This is spectral contrast enhancement. It makes frequencies in the spectrum of a male's call stand out relative to adjacent frequencies. This is also analogous, besides noise canceling headphones, it's analogous to the signal processing algorithms used in hearing aids and cochlear implants. It is basically amplifying or boosting the frequencies present in speech sounds, which attenuate or filter out frequencies between those in speech, sounds, or both. So it's kind of separating those out. That's how a cochlear implant or a hearing aid works. But so in the frogs, the lungs attenuate the frequencies occurring between male mating calls and other noise. So the physical mechanism by which it works is similar to how noise canceling headphone works as well. The lung inflation has no effect on directional hearing, doesn't make them hear better, but there is an impact on sensitivity in the eardrums. So with the inflated lungs, the eardrum vibrated less in response to sounds within a specific frequency range. So it is actually a physical interaction where, because they're kind of expanding their cavity, I guess, like, there's pressure against their head. Mm-hmm. So it's reducing the amount of vibration happening in their eardrum. So they're dampening vibrations and canceling out noise. So essentially, it works like noise canceling headphones. It also confirms that females can hear males of their own species, despite other sounds happening in the area. But they also did a kind of a control test to make sure that the female could hear the males with or without their lungs inflated. So the lungs had no impact on the sound or the interest of the female to male connection, but it filtered out the noise, which is really what this was about.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
The idea that you just take a breath, it's going to affect how you hear. It's so interesting. And that is a strategy that is used by the females to be able to hear their mates.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's adaptation. That is specific. That's amazing.
Yeah. So for the next steps for this group of researchers, they want to find out more about the physical interaction between sources of sound, external, internal via the ear, and internal via the lungs. So they want to look at these three different types, and they want to determine the eardrum's vibration response. But they also want to know if this is a widespread phenomenon in frogs. They only saw it in the green tree frog so far. So they want to see if this is more widespread. I think that, it also wouldn't be that far of a jump to foresee this being used in future cochlear implants, hearing aids, noise canceling headphones, any of those things. If we see it perfected in nature, there might be something there for us to learn to improve our technology as well.
Totally. Yeah. Well, it's changing the ability of whatever vibratory structure or whatever sound transduction structure that you have to be able to pass certain frequencies along to the ear. Yeah. Cool. Thanks, Blair.
Yeah.
Really interesting. Super interesting. And now it's time for torture.
Oh, no. I was feeling so good.
It was so great. Justin, talk about torture? Torture us much?
Yeah, so there's this thing called the Department of Corrections. It's where our criminal justice system places people in a correctional environment to, as the name would suggest, rehabilitate people and get them ready to re-enter society at some later point. However, as with a lot of our institutions, sometimes the thing it sounds like it does and the thing it does are different. We've been talking a lot this past year about the sort of intersection between policing and mental illness. This is a study by researchers at Florida State University. They published it in Justice Quarterly, a publication of the Academy of Criminal Justice Sciences. They found that having mental illness was associated with a significant, and I'd say highly significant, increase in the likelihood of being placed in extended solitary confinement when incarcerated. This is quoting, our findings provide new information on how mental illness shapes experiences for incarcerated men, and more broadly, how the criminal justice system responds to people with mental illness. This is Sonia Scenic, professor of criminology and criminal justice at FSU, who led the study. Bottom line is that incarcerated people with mental illness appear to garner differential responses from the prison system. So we've sort of talked a lot about in the police response to citizens, whether they should be the ones taking that sort of front line against people who are having mental issues. Maybe they're getting called even sometimes to the family. We've heard all sorts of tragic stories about this, about the training and whether they're equipped for it or if they're the right ones to respond. Regardless, that's still not solved. People get incarcerated from these scenarios and others who have untreated mental illnesses because our society has, of course, not taken it upon ourselves to care for one another to any significant degree where we take care of this. So anyway, solitary confinement, if you're not familiar with, that's a practice where they will take somebody who's already incarcerated in jail and put them into an isolated cell where they stay anywhere from 22 to 24 hours a day, sometimes for months, with no other contact. Researchers studied 155,018 men who entered prisons in a large state prison on or after July 1st of 2007. They were released all on or before December 31st, 2015. So these were 8-year or under incarcerations in a state prison. The men were assessed within 60 days of their arrival to determine if they met the criteria for psychiatric diagnoses. More than 15,000 of the men were diagnosed with a mental health condition. These men were then matched with a control group of the same size and who had equivalent characteristics. So they went through a pretty good list of making, the type of crimes, the type of criminal history, the race, all the psychological traits that they had, all these sort of things, kind of matched them up with 15,000 who were not diagnosed with a mental illness. The study found that 1% of all of these men that they had gotten, so 30,000, were ended up at some point in the extended solitary confinement. It also found that prisoners with mental illness were 170% more likely to be placed for extended periods in solitary confinement, depending on their diagnosis, and this is sometimes for months at a time. The higher risk was present for people with bipolar disorder, major depression, schizophrenia, psychotic antisocial personality disorder, and some other personality disorders. But it wasn't higher for anxiety, impulse control, or post-traumatic stress. So you can imagine that doesn't sound like a treatment that I've heard of by any mental health organization in this century, or at least the last half of the last century. That seems like a very outdated way of handling somebody with a mental illness, putting them in 23-hour-a-day isolation. And that means you can't use a phone, can't have visitors, you don't have anything. You're absolutely put in isolation. Reasons that they were placing these individuals that they had listed were things like safety concerns, problem with institutional adjustment, that sort of thing. But they had weighted that against the other 15,000 people in the group who weren't diagnosed, and they found that, well, this is the quote here. This is Myra Pecan, doctoral student, criminology and criminal justice at FSU. Our results suggest that the association between mental illness and solitary confinement is not simply a matter of more violent behavior by this population. Rather, incarcerated men with mental illness may have more difficulty adjusting to prison and its rules, resulting in more punitive responses by prison staff. This is, again, police mentality being applied to mental health issues, and what it is showing up as in prison, as we have seen it showing up on the streets of our society, as an escalation of force, as opposed to any real understanding of the underlying issues that they're the patient or prisoner maybe.
So now what we need to do is take this scientific study that has been done and all the others that have been done on corrections facilities and actually do something with that information. I think that's the tough part, right? Is that there's lots of hurdles between this and that. But I think that's why this conversation is so important, right? Is because it's about public perception, but it's also about making sure that data is part of the process when managing these facilities, right?
As long as you have a political system or governing system that cares what numbers are. Yeah. Which,
right.
Throughout this pandemic, a thing that's literally could kill anybody, we haven't seen a whole lot of care for the data anyway. So I'm a little pessimistic. Anyway, so I'm going to move on to my next story. This one's...
I hope that before you continue with the pessimism, the hope is that studies like this will shine a light on problems that people didn't know were prevalent, that the majority of people didn't know were prevalent, and that change will be made possible as a result. Because people do care. So.
Sure. Well, some people care. That's my next story. Some people don't. This is a University of Washington study. It shows an identification with all of humanity as opposed to identification with geographic areas such as countries, such as nationalism, or even a town, predicts whether someone will engage in pro-social behaviors. And in this case, they tied it, particularly anchored it to the pandemic. So whether they would donate their own masks to a hospital, or they would come to the aid of a sick person, if they were thought more. And so the questionnaire was a bunch of questions that people could take online. I think they had 2,500 responses from more than 80 countries. So it's an international study. So this isn't specifically United States, because we only have 50 countries here. Researchers say that the findings could have implications for health messaging in the next pandemic, because people, so they'd ask questions like, do you care what goes on in other countries? Do you think we should be involved in what goes on in other countries? Would you? So sort of a whole bunch of these. And then they would ask, one of those big surveys where they're asking you sideways questions about your philosophy. People who were more nationalistic were less likely to call an ambulance and wait with a sick person for it to arrive, less likely to go to a grocery store and buy food for a neighboring family, less likely to drive a person exhibiting obvious symptoms of COVID-19 to a hospital, less likely to donate masks of their families to a hospital that ran short, and less likely to follow World Health Organization guidelines. People who thought more generally about humanity, not tied to who those people were, what town they were, what country they were in, any of that, were more likely to help out in all of those instances. Which is sort of interesting if you think about it. If that correlation holds true beyond this study, it means the more nationalistic you are, the more you're like, I love my country, the less you will care for your neighbors. Right? Then what's your country?
Isn't that the whole thing about nationalism, though? Is that, nationalism, when pushed to the extreme, is essentially an us versus them mentality.
Yeah, but it's weird that, you think that when you're talking about your neighbor's family that's running low on food, you're very nationalistic, but you don't care if your neighbors go hungry at all. There's something, there's like a disconnect between being, it sort of reminded me in a weird way of, all the USA chanting that happened in this Capitol insurgency thing that took place. And then the guy who's trying to shame text his ex-girlfriend. It turned out how he ends up getting caught. But he doesn't even get along with his ex-girlfriend. He doesn't even get along with the people closest to him in the world, but he's very pro-nationalistic and chanting USA as he's, there's like a weird disconnect that happens when you get people thinking nationalistically that has nothing to do with caring for their fellow country person.
But so what I was saying before, though, is that it's a similar mentality. So nation versus other nation.
Right. That's
house versus other house.
Right. And it goes all the way down,
other
right?
state, right? Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So
yes.
It is a similar pitting that can create similar thinking within your brain.
Yeah, it's fear and it's us versus them.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
So
applied at various levels.
Mm-hmm. So that one of the things they're thinking about doing is taking this data and applying it to messaging for future emergency health campaigns and that sort of thing. Although I think it's sort of interesting. You would have to, I guess, then you would be phrasing it for the good of your nation, for good of our nation. Hey, our nation is doing worse at the pandemic than these other nations, so we've got to beat that nation by wearing masks. It has to be something. You have to get a little more convoluted in it, I guess.
So I'm gonna push back here because the title of your article is "Helpful Behavior During Pandemic Tied to Recognizing Common Humanity." So that to me reads
Right.
as getting away from nationalism is
Right.
what creates helpful behavior.
Correct.
Right.
So,
So maybe you can,
but not
maybe
the
you can
messaging.
start.
Now you're talking about school. Now you're talking about getting people to have that sort of thinking in the first place. You're absolutely right. But what they found was those people who already are not thinking that way were the ones who didn't respond. Not that they weren't getting messaged that way. It wasn't saying this.
But yes, yeah. So, okay. So people who are more likely to help are those who they're not thinking nationally. They're
Who
thinking
think
in a
people
more
first,
connective
then
manner.
maybe country or maybe town or town and country. You know,
But
they
But you're
globally.
right in terms of being able to
Act
start.
locally.
How do you approach somebody? You meet somebody where they are. So perhaps you start a conversation talking in an us versus them perspective, and then you bring it around to another perspective that connects them with somebody else, and you start bringing the conversation. You manage the conversation on a personal level to be able to bring them around to a different way of thinking that is less combative or less personally oriented. It's something that is it's a long-term strategy, not short-term messaging for sure. If you're interested in a TWIS shirt or other item of our merchandise, head over to twist.org and click on that Zazzle link and browse our store. There are a lot of fun items for you that will help us. All right, I have a story. Let's take some psychedelics, man.
All right, yeah. For the rest, is that we should save that for the
It's
after
time.
show. I'd save that for the after show.
No, no,
I'll
no.
be the
live on the
designated
air.
driver.
I really want to talk about psychedelics right now in a microdose. It's a microdose of psychedelics. And that's how I'm leading into my story. Microdosing, it has really become a popular trend among many people. People purport that it makes them feel better about life, makes them optimistic, treats depression, any number, gets rid of anxiety, any number of positive benefits from microdosing psychedelics like mushrooms or LSD are used right now by people privately. This is not anything that is
Clinical.
prescribed or clinical. Yes, it's not there yet. But researchers are looking into the benefits. And that's where this particular study got its start. Researchers in the UK, because the United States is a bit more prudish about doing these kinds of studies. Researchers they advertised, they went through a big rigmarole to get permission to do this study. So they were able to get their human study approved, get it allowed. They had to find volunteers. They got 1,600 people by going onto Reddit and other microdosing websites to be able to find people who were microdosing to volunteer for their study. But this great article in Science in their news section says, eventually garnered more than 1,600 signups, but once potential participants realized they'd have to procure their own psychedelics, interest ebbed.
That's very funny.
So they ended up with 246 people in the experiment.
Oh, jeez, that's quite a cut.
Yeah.
Huge cut in the number of people. The interesting aspect...
Wait, quick question.
Okay.
Can
Yes.
you just tell me the name? Hook me up with 2 or 3 of the people who stayed in the experiment. Then I might be able to join. Well, I'm saying,
Anonymized,
I'm just like
I don't
one
know.
person away, or maybe 2, from being able to join this study.
That's right. If you're curious about what microdosing is, I did gloss over that. Microdosing is taking a microdose, a very small, supposed to be sub-cognitively active dose. It's supposed to be a dose that's small enough that you don't notice it. People might say, why would I take hallucinogens, psychedelics, if they're not going to do anything? But the idea is that it has beneficial effects to
It's
attention and mood. And it's almost, yes.
The homeopathic trip.
It's not homeopathy. They're not that small, but they're not that big either. However, some people in this study do take doses in that they're able to feel things. So there's definite diversity and variance in the sizes of the doses that people take that they call micro. So A few caveats to the study. People had to go find their own psychedelics, which means that they were not standardized. A dose of mushrooms for one person isn't necessarily going to be the same dose of mushrooms for another person, all the things. So no standardization. Don't jump in yet, Justin. And then for the approach that they used, they had the volunteers in the study take capsules, gel caps, and put active dose of whatever their drug of choice was versus an inactive dose of something, say sugar, just giving themselves a sugar pill. And they were supposed to make the gel caps weigh approximately the same. These were opaque gel caps so that the person taking them, even though they filled them themselves, could not tell what was inside the gel caps. And in the process, at one point, they realized that people were having mushroom burps from their mushroom microdoses. And so they said, well, maybe you should put some dried shiitakes in that other gel cap instead of sugar. So they did figure out how to control for some of the issues in this study, but not all of them. Okay, so they had self-controlled gel caps that basically self-blinding procedure in which they had people put their gel caps that had been filled of active and inactive doses in envelopes. And then they had them tag these envelopes with QR codes that they got from the study website. And then they would shuffle the envelopes and take different envelopes, take a picture of the QR code that would go to an app on the data collection side for the scientists. So the scientists knew which doses people were getting, whether they were active or inactive. But people volunteering did not necessarily know whether they were taking an active dose. Except in some cases because people's doses are bigger than micro, apparently. And the bottom line is, through all of this, with their 256 odd people that they were working with on their self-blinding procedure of mushroom burps and whatnot, they discovered that microdosing leads to the exact same reported feelings of well-being as placebo. So the conclusion of this study is that microdosing doesn't work, but giving yourself something does, because across the board, the people in the trial who were microdosing, they all reported improvement in their sense of well-being.
That sounds like self-care to me, right? That sounds like you took a moment, you took your multivitamin, you put on your exfoliating mask, took them, it's creating it's almost like a mindfulness exercise for yourself. Like you're doing something good for your emotional, mental well-being.
And there have been studies that have shown that even if people know they are taking a placebo, in this case, people did not know they were taking a placebo or not, but there are studies that show that if you know you're taking a placebo, it can still have a beneficial effect similar to the drug. So I'm thinking now, I need to go make myself a whole bunch of gel caps of nothing and just take one every day and tell myself I'm microdosing, and I'm going to feel great.
Well, it says something else, though, that I think is important and maybe a little bit alarming, in that we had all these people basically hand raise and say, I would like to be part of a psychedelic study, but found acquiring psychedelics not to be cheap and readily accessible. So something has changed since I was a teenager. And that might be the real thing that this study is revealing, is that we have a psychedelic shortage.
Oh, no.
Well, I think to really, truly know, to state the obvious, you have to standardize, right? You'd have to do this study where everyone's on the same dose of the same thing.
And you can't with psychedelics, because like Kiki was saying, the experiences and the biochemistry and the brain chemistry that takes place and the way they affect people are so different that even trying to have a generalized, attempting to give a dose that has some type of effect is going to be very different than a lot of other pharmaceutical interactions that people go through, because it's psychedelic. You're talking about jumping into the brain frames of human being and make it all wibbly wobbly. Some people can ride that wave, man, and some people just come crashing down or just sink to the bottom right away. It's like there's a whole lot of variety that takes place.
There is a whole lot of variety that takes place. And when it's something that changes the way people interact with the world around them, with reality, in a way that it substantially shifts it, it's not the same as, oh, my liver metabolism is faster than somebody else's, and so an NSAID or an aspirin doesn't work as long on me as somebody else. It's not. It's a completely. Yeah, it makes the study harder. It makes being like Justin said, the homogenized dose, standardized dose. It makes it harder to give that out and to know what that dose is going to do. Yeah, but I found it very interesting, primarily that. Not that, microdosing doesn't work, but that it was a placebo effect. And they're going to look at this further. They're going to try and do pharmaceutical grade psychedelics if they can get approval for that at some point to be able to standardize doses. They're going to try with cannabidiol and other substances that people use for various things. They're going to move this study along and see what happens. But in the meantime, it's not good news for microdosing, but in terms of, as you said, Blair, self-care, a possible way to placebo dose yourself into, I'm going to micro placebo dose myself into a general sense of well-being. That might work.
Yeah, and I don't really know if that's like how those drugs work. Anyway, like it's more about making you do a lot of work. Fun, terror, interest, terror, fun, terror. Like this is like a roller coaster. When you're doing like the
not microdosing is different.
I know
microdosing is not supposed to be any of that. Microdosing is supposed to be
you're not going to get the
subactive.
benefit. You got to do some like serious mental therapy on destroying the universe and rebuilding it every like 45 minutes or so, to really get the beneficial afterglow effects of one of these hardcore psychedelics. You can't tiptoe in. Nope. It doesn't work that way.
Can't tiptoe. I had other stories that I wanted to talk about tonight, but hey, this show is going on, so we are not going to talk about these stories. You're just going to have to wonder, what other science was there? And then come back again next week, because I think, have we come to the end of the show?
I think we may have.
I think we may have come to the end of the show. I really want to say thank you all for joining us tonight. I need to say thank you specifically to the people who help with the show. Fada, thank you so much for your help with show notes and social media. Rachel, thank you for your assistance. Gord, thank you for chat room help. And Identity4, thank you for recording the show. And thank you to our Patreon sponsors. Thank you to Karen Tazi, Woody MS, Andre Bassett, Chris Wozniak, Dave Bunn, Vegard Chefstad, Hal Snyder, Donathan Styles, a.k.a. Don Stylo, John Scioli, Guillaume, John Lee, Ali Coffin, Gaurav Sharma, Shubru, Darwin Hannon, Donald Mundus, Stephen Alberon, Daryl Myshak, Stu Pollock, Andrew Swanson, Fredus 104, Sky Luke, Paul Ronovich, Kevin Reardon, Noodles, Jack, Brian Carrington, Matt Bass, Joshua Fury, Sean and Nina Land, John McKee, Greg Riley, Mark Hessenflow, Gene Tellier, Steve Leisman, a.k.a. Zima, Ken Hayes, Howard Tan, Christopher Rappin, Dana Pearson, Richard, Brendan Minish, Johnny Gridley, Kevin Railsback, Flying Out, Christopher Dreyer, Mark Massaros, Artyom, Greg Briggs, John Atwood, Robert Coburn, Rudy Garcia, Dave Wilkinson, Rodney Lewis, Paul, Rick Ramus, Matt Sutter, Philip Shane, Kurt Larson, Craig Landon, Mountain Sloth, Jim Drapeau, Sarah Chavez, Sue Doster, Jason Old, Steve Neighbor, Eric Knapp, E.O., Kevin Parachan, Aaron Luth, and Steve DeBell, Bob Calder, Marjorie, Paul Stanton, Paul Disney, Patrick Pecoraro, Tony Steele, Ulysses Adkins, Brian Condren, and Jason Roberts. Thank you for all of your support on Patreon. And if you are interested in supporting us on Patreon, head to This Week in Science and click on the Patreon button. On next week's show,
we will be back on Wednesday, 8 p.m. Pacific Time, broadcasting live from our YouTube and Facebook channels and from twis.org/live.
Hey, do you want to listen to us as a podcast? Maybe you want to do some dishes while you listen? Just search for This Week in Science wherever podcasts are found. If you enjoy the show, get your friends to subscribe as well.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes and links to stories will be available on our website, www.twis.org. And you can also sign up for our newsletter.
You can also contact us directly. Email Kirsten at thisweekinscience.com, Justin at twistminion@gmail.com, or me, Blair, at blairbaz@twist.org. Just be sure to put TWIS, TWIS, in the subject line, or your email will be spam filtered in the live volcano.
Oh,
Into a live volcano.
No. You can also hit us up on the Twitter, where we are at TWIS Science, at Dr. Kiki, at JacksonFly, and at Blair's Menagerie. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes during the night, please let us know.
We'll be back here next week, and we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you've learned anything from the show, remember,
it's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth, and I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got one disclaimer, and it shouldn't be news, that what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just yet understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. Jeopardy. And This Week in Science is coming your way. So everybody listen to everything we say, and if you use our method instead of rolling a die, we may rid the world of toxoplasma gondii. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 Got a laundry list of items I want to address, from stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness. I'm trying to promote more rational thought, and I'll try to answer any question you've got. So how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This Week in Science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say, and if you've learned anything from the words that we've said, then please just remember it's all in your head. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in 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 Science.